In the previous Sarga, we saw how Ṛśyaśṛṅga was brought to Ayodhya along with Shanta. With his arrival, Daśaratha's plan for the Aśvamedha Yajña had gained the necessary support. However, the Yajña itself had not yet begun. In this Sarga, the 12th, you will see how Ṛśyaśṛṅga continued to reside in the palace, honored by Daśaratha and attended with due respect. Some time passes and the season of spring arrives. At this point, Daśaratha decides to move forward. Following the prescribed rites, yatha vidhi, he entrusts the Aśvamedha Yajña to Ṛśyaśṛṅga, formally choosing him to preside over the Yajña. He then instructs his ministers to begin the necessary preparations. As part of these preparations, the Aśva, the sacrificial horse, is selected, duly consecrated, and released, as laid down in tradition. With this, the first steps towards the Yajña are set in motion, though the Yajña itself is yet to begin. Let us now listen to how Maharshi Valmiki describes this. Tataha kale bahutithe kasminschit sumanohare vasante samanuprapte ragyo yashthum mano bhavat. Tataha pranamyam shirasa tam vipram deva varninam yagyaya varayamasa santanartham kulasya cha. Tatheti cha Sarajanam uvacha vasudhadipam sambharaha sambhriyantam te turagascha vimucchatam. Saravyaschottare tire yagya bhumir vidhiyatam tato bravindrupo vakyam brahmanan veda paragam. Sumantra vahya kshipram rutvijo brahmavadinaha suyagyam vamadevam cha javalim athakashyapam. Purohitam vasishtam cha ye chanye dvijasattamaha tataha sumantrastvaritam gatva tvarita vikramaha. Samanayat satan sarvan samastan veda paragan tan pujayitva dharmatma raja Daśarathastada. Dharmartha sahitam yuktam shlakshnam vachanam abravit mama tatapyamanasya putrartham nasti vai sukham. Putrartham heyamedhena yakshamiti matirmama tadham yashtumichchami heyamedhena karmana. Rishiputra prabhavena kaman prapsyami chapyaham tatah sadhvati tad vakyam brahmanaha pratyapoojayan. Vasishta pramukhaha sarve parthivasya mukhachutam Ṛśyaśṛṅga purogascha pratyuchur nrupatim tada. Sambharaha sambhriyantam te turagascha vimucchatam saravyaschottare tire yagya bhumir vidhiyatam. Sarvatha prapsyase putramschaturo amita vikraman yasyate dharmiki buddhiriyam putrarthamagata. Tataha prito bhavat raja shrutva tu dvijabhashitam amatyanam abravit raja harshenedam shubhaksharam. Gurunam vachanat chigram sambharaha sambhriyantu me samartha adishtataschaśvaha sopadhyayo vimucchatam. Saravyaschottare tire yagya bhumir vidhiyatam shantayaschaabhivardhantam yatha kalpam yatha vidhi. Shakyaha kartumayam yagyaha sarvenapi mahikshita na parado bhavet kashtho yadhyasmin kratu sattame. Chitram hi mrugayantyete vidvamso brahma rakshasaha vidihinasya yagyasya satyah karta vinashyati. Tad yatha vidhipurvam me kraturesha samapyate tatha vidhanam kriyatam samarthaha karaneshviha. Tatheti cha tatah sarve mantrinah pratyapoojayan parthivendrasya tadvakyam yatha gyaptam akurvata. Tato dvijaste dharmagyastuvan parthivarshabham anugyatas sarve punarjagmur yathagatam. Gateshu teshu vipreshu mantrinastan naradipaha visarjayitva svam veshma pravivesha mahamatihi. Then some time passed after Ṛśyaśṛṅga's arrival in Ayodhya. Spring arrived in all its beauty. And King Daśaratha's mind turned towards performing the Aśvamedha Yajña. Ṛśyaśṛṅga was radiant like a celestial being. With the desire for progeny and the continuation of his lineage, Daśaratha bowed to him and respectfully requested him to conduct the Yajña. Ṛśyaśṛṅga consented and said to the king, "O Rajan, let all the materials required for the Yajña be gathered. Let the sacrificial horse be released, and let the Yajña Bhumi be prepared on the northern bank of the Sarayu." Daśaratha then instructed Sumantra, "Bring here without delay the learned Brahmanas and the Ritviks who are masters of the Vedas, Suyajña, Vamadeva, Jabali, Kashyapa, my Kulapurohit Vasishtha Maharshi, and all the other excellent Brahmanas." Sumantra went immediately and brought them all into Daśaratha's presence. After receiving them all with due reverence, Daśaratha addressed them with gentle and appropriate words. He said, "O revered ones, I have long suffered because I have no son. For me, without a son, there is truly no happiness. Therefore, for the sake of obtaining a son, I have resolved to perform the Aśvamedha Yajña." He continued, "Through the spiritual power of Ṛśyaśṛṅga, I am confident that my desire will be fulfilled." All the Brahmanas, led by Vasishtha Maharshi, approved Daśaratha's words. Ṛśyaśṛṅga and the others then said, "Let the materials be gathered, let the horse be released." "Let the Yajña Bhumi be prepared on the northern bank of the Sarayu." Since this righteous resolve has arisen in you for the sake of sons, O Rajan, you shall certainly obtain 4 sons of immeasurable prowess. Hearing these words, Daśaratha was filled with joy. He then commanded his ministers, "According to the words of my gurus, let the materials be gathered quickly. Let the sacrificial horse be released under the supervision of capable men and the officiating priest. Let the Yajña Bhumi be prepared on the northern bank of the Sarayu. Let all propitiatory rites be performed properly according to the rule and according to Vidhi." Daśaratha then also cautioned them, "This great Yajña can be performed by any king, but only if no grave fault occurs in its execution. Learned Brahmarakshasas look for even the smallest of flaw. If a Yajña is performed without the proper Vidhi, the performer may perish immediately. Therefore, let every arrangement be made so that this yajna of mine is completed strictly according to the Shastras. You are capable of carrying this out. The ministers accepted the king's command and acted as per his instructions. The Brahmanas praised Daśaratha, the knower of Dharma, and with his permission returned as they had come. And thus, after dismissing the ministers also, Daśaratha, the great-minded king, returned to his inner palace. Daśaratha stands at the cusp of commencing the Aśvamedha Yajña. Yajña, the process, that configuration of sound, matter and intention, lies at the very heart of what we call Sanatana Dharma. It is not peripheral, it is not optional, it is so central to this way of living that it is impossible to truly comprehend the Vedic vision without first appreciating what a yajna is. It belongs to the oldest layers of Vedic knowledge, far preceding commentary, interpretation, or philosophical system building. What we encounter later in the Upanishads and the Puranas finds one of its earliest expressions here, in the yajna. The Vedic corpus is not a single text, but a vast structured body of knowledge comprising of the 4 Vedas, each with a distinct and indispensable role in relation to the yajna. The Rig Veda is the oldest and the most foundational of them all, comprising of 10 mandalas, over 1,000 suktas, and approximately 10,500 mantras. It contains hymns addressed to the various devatas, but these are not merely poetic compositions or prayers in the modern sense. They are precise invocations, crafted in a highly structured and ancient language that appears almost cryptic to us today. To read the Rig Veda now is like looking at the notation of a grand symphony without being able to hear the music itself. What we possess is the form, but not always the living resonance it once carried. The Yajurveda provides the procedural dimension of the yajna. It exists in 2 major recensions, the Shukla and the Krishna Yajurveda, and details with great precision about how a yajna is to be conducted, what is to be done, when it is to be done, how each offering is to be made, and how the altar is to be constructed, how the sequence is to unfold. Nothing is left to improvisation. If the Rig Veda gives the mantra, the Yajurveda gives it the action. And the Samaveda takes these mantras and elevates them into melody. With approximately 1800 verses, many of them drawn from the Rig Veda, it transforms the spoken word into an experience of sound and vibration. The Sama is not concerned with meaning in the intellectual sense. It is rather concerned with intonation, with resonance, with carrying the mantra into a domain where language begins to dissolve into pure vibration. And lastly, the Atharvana Veda extends the Vedic vision into the domain of lived experience, touching upon healing, daily life, and more immediate human concerns. It represents the application of this knowledge into the field of life itself. And when taken together, these four Vedas are not separate texts. They are interlocking dimensions of a single vision: sound, action, vibration, and application, converging most powerfully in the act of a yajna. The Vedas were not written in the conventional sense. They were seen, heard, and received. The rishis did not compose them as intellectual constructs. They entered states of such stillness and receptivity that allowed them to perceive a reality that was already present. What they heard is Shruti, that which was not created, but rather revealed to them. This is critical. The yajna is not the product of human imagination. It is not limited by the distortion of an individual mind. It is an attempt to preserve fidelity to something that was directly experienced. And Agni is at the forefront, at the very heart of this entire structure. The Rig Veda opens with Agnimile Purohitam Yajñasya Devam Ritwijam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam. This is the very first utterance of the Rig Veda, and it begins with Agni. He is the Purohitam, placed at the forefront. Ritwijam, the operative intelligence within the act. Hotaram, the carrier of the offering. The Veda does not speak of Agni in one dimension. It returns to him again and again, as if unable to exhaust what he is. Agni is presented as a guide. Agnenaya supata raye asman vishvani deva vayunani vidvan yuyodhyasma jhuranam eno Bhuishtam te nama uktim vidhema. Meaning, O Agni, lead us by the right path. You know the ways of existence. Remove from us that which leads us astray. And Agni as the cosmic presence. Agni murdha divaha kukutpatihi prativya ayam Apamretamshi Jinpati. Agni is the head of the heaven, the lord of the summit, this one of the earth. He also energizes the generative powers of the waters. For Daśaratha, Agni is not an abstract deity. He was experienced as a living presence. Agni was not merely a belief. For Daśaratha, it was rather a direct perception. For him, Agni was not invoked. He was already present. Agni was not the god of fire, but rather fire is the visible expression of Agnideva. Agnideva is the intelligent, responsive presence that operates through fire, that or who which receives, transforms, and carries, not symbolically, but actually. Daśaratha does not perform the Aśvamedha Yajña alone. He brings Ṛśyaśṛṅga, because the Yajña is not about intention alone. It requires precision of mantra, the accuracy of the sound, and the clarity of the mind. Mantras are not mere words. They operate simultaneously at multiple levels: grammatical, ritualistic, vibrational, cosmological, and ultimately adhyatmic. They align with the organizing principles of reality itself. Ṛśyaśṛṅga did not merely recite the mantras, he lived in their reality. And as the yugas progressed, something shifted. Not the yajna, not the Veda, but us. Our capacity to perceive directly diminished. Beings like the Maharshis became rare. The conditions required to sustain such perception thinned. The oral tradition preserved the Rig Veda for millennia. But the mere preservation of sound is not the preservation of the experience. We retained the mantras, the procedures, and perhaps the form, but lost the living relationship with what they pointed to. But Daśaratha lived in a different world. He did not operate under this limitation. He lived in Treta Yuga, where the divine was not simply a concept, not an abstraction, not a belief, but rather an immediate perceptible presence. When he performed the yajna, he did not hope for a result. He rather acted within a framework where alignment produces response. The devatas participating in the yajna were not metaphorical constructs. They were experienced as living entities, as real as sunlight, as real as the wind, as real as the sound. Today, we have the hymns, we have the structure, we have the record, but what they described is no longer immediately accessible to us. We relate to it intellectually, academically, symbolically, where they experienced it as the texture of reality itself. But this is not a story of loss. The Maharshis of antiquity speak of Yuga Dharma, that the movement of time itself is cyclical. What diminishes returns. What becomes obscure becomes clear again. The same current that now appears as a narrow stream will in time flow wide once more. And more importantly, even within this age, even now, an individual is not cut off. With a mind made still, with a certain quality of attention, it is still possible to enter into that living relationship with the divine, not as a belief, not as a concept, but rather as a presence. That is why this tradition was never meant to be merely studied. It was meant to be entered. And that is why listening to the Ramayana is not merely an act of remembrance alone. It is, after all, the Vedopabhrahmana, that which expands and reveals the truth of the Veda through lived narrative. Let us now return to Ayodhya, not casually, but with a stiller mind, because only then might we begin to sense Daśaratha's certainty, Ṛśyaśṛṅga's clarity, and Agni not as fire but as presence. In that yajna, there was no interpretation. The divine did not need to be believed in. Vayu came, Varuna came, Indra attended, Brahma himself was present, and finally Vishnu descended.